Hey guys, so we're continuing to talk about groups of Americans in the 1800s, and today we're going to highlight ranchers. So ranching is the practice of tending herds of animals. That might be cattle of some sort, sheep, that kind of thing. And the Great Plains were a great place to engage in ranching because you had this prairie grasslands region that wasn't always wonderful for farming, but large herd animals could just go out and eat, and that's great. I mean, think about the buffalo. There's a reason there were so many buffalo on the Great Plains, and once a lot of those guys are removed, then it's even better for ranching. So the ranchers, interestingly enough, are going to be a little bit like homesteaders. They're going to have their homestead, and they're not going to own all the land on which their cattle graze. This is going to be owned predominantly by the government, but everyone is allowed to kind of let their cows go out, or their sheep or their whatever, go out and just eat on the open range. That's why it was open. It was open to everyone. It wasn't all private property. So the ranchers are going to build up estates because they're going to take advantage of various government programs and subsidies. Sometimes they're going to be really corrupt. And that's because the government is a long way away in Washington, D.C., and a lot of subsidy programs are not really well tended. So you could be doing something with irrigation that could get you some extra money, and you might be double dipping what you're doing, and no one is really there to see if you're cheating. Now, the ranchers aren't the only people who do this. Lots of people who engage with various programs will take advantage of the fact that they aren't very well regulated. So if you are a rancher and you have lots of cattle, you're going to hire another group of people called cowboys. And what are cowboys? Well, cowboys are the people who are going to actually take care of the herd. Cowboys have a long tradition. It's really rooted, like we've had people who have tended herds forever and ever and ever, like go all the way back to the Middle Ages. But in North America, this goes back to the Spanish, because who brings cows to this part of the world? Well, it would be the Spanish settlers, right? Who come before the United States is formed. And as a result, a lot of the American cowboys are going to be people who were working with cattle, not here on the Great Plains, but in other countries. In fact, a good third of all the cowboys who were working here were Latino. So they knew what they were doing. And by the way, this kind of brings me to a misnomer about how we see the cowboy. All of us have probably watched a Western at some point in our lives, and John Wayne, the Duke, is probably the most famous of all cowboys, and because he made like a big old slew of Westerns. If you watch John Wayne movies, you would think that most cowboys were white. Well, a lot of cowboys are white. A lot of them do look like John Wayne, but they're actually extremely diverse because the ranchers didn't give a hot dang. What they wanted were skilled crewmen, okay? And a lot of the cowboy crews actually formed themselves. So you would have white and black, and as I mentioned, a lot of people who were from Mexico especially. And another reason for that is, even the longhorn cows, they are not indigenous to the Great Plains. They come from Mexico and ended up kind of migrating up here. But anyway, the cowboys will drive cattle to city markets. A lot of these guys who are people of color will actually make more money as a cowboy than they could in various other professions. And so that was good for them. And it was very hard work, but it was a lifestyle that is deeply, deeply associated with this period. It was free. It was, these guys are very independent. But the cattle drives are mostly over by 1900. What killed the cattle drives and the open range? You remember those other homesteaders who are going and they're settling farms and they're also in this area? Let's say you finally grow some corn. Do you really want longhorns tromping through there? If you're a cowboy, do you really care if your cattle go through someone else's farm? Not really. So what do you need? You need some way to discourage these cattle drives that will disturb your own private property. And the thing that is invented that will kill the cattle drive and thus change kind of the position of the cowboy in American culture is barbed wire. Very cheap, very easy to string across places, and very, very discouraging to cows. So barbed wire kills the cattle drives and thus changes the cowboy. Okay.